Last session we had a little bit of a technological glitch where Microsoft Game Bar, which I have been using to record our sessions, has failed me. It only recorded half of the session. And our next session was scheduled for Valentine's Day, which, as I'm sure all of you know, that's a big no-go if you've got a significant other in your life. So we had to push that back a week. So what that translates to is essentially 2 weeks before we can get back into the action. But I didn't want to just leave you guys hanging. I mean, you're kind enough to subscribe and to return and to listen and watch and join us as we go through our homebrew world of Aoethera. So, I thought, why don't I take this time and turn this crisis into an opportunity to give you a lore dump? And since we didn't start recording our sessions and posting them until a little bit later into the game, I figured I could also, on top of a lore dump, bring you up to speed with where we are in this story. So if you're like me and you're a big stickler for continuity, maybe, just maybe, you'll better understand what's going on, and maybe even enjoy the story just a little bit more for that. So, first things first, let's go ahead with the lore dump. So, a brief modern history of Aoethera, and this was a PDF that I sent out to my players before session 0. Essentially, 150 years ago, each continent was ruled by its own kings or queens, with the exception of Aethel, which was a wild land and sparsely populated. King Bisdain of Othelis, a primarily human continent, set his eyes on Aethel. He wasn't the only one, though. In the west, the orcs of Undgar had several settlements established, and in the east, the elves of Veywol had built a magnificent frontier city named Malvik and had designs for another one. King Bisdain began his bloody conquest in the west while secretly building the Eld Bridge to the east. The human steel was far superior to the orcish iron, and they managed to drive the orcs entirely from the land and into seclusion on Undgar. The king and his troops wasted no time moving east, converging with reinforcements from across the newly finished Eld Bridge, and they laid siege to Malvik. While the elves had far fewer numbers, their tactics and techniques kept the invaders at bay for nearly 20 years. As the years passed, the elves' numbers slowly dwindled, and the capital city of Ishvewol across the sea was getting desperate to liberate their surrounded people. It was in this desperation that the elves created the Sentinels, mechanical humanoid constructs built to be controlled by the implanted brains of volunteer soldiers. These soldiers were generally wounded in battle and were either going to die or live entirely disabled. And for some of them, they chose to volunteer for this Sentinel program and get a new lease on life in a mechanical body. The Sentinels were then unleashed on the shores of Aethel, where they moved on and swiftly defeated the human army that had been encamped around Malvik so long that the camp made the city nearly 4 times the square footage that it was originally. It was during this offensive a few Sentinels were captured due to their prototype nature of their bodies and not being fully functional. When the survivors of the human army returned to Othelis with their captives, the human scientists immediately got to work reverse engineering the Sentinels and making improvements on the design, giving them more than just humanoid shapes and building them for specific functions. The elves took advantage of the Eld Bridge to push into Othelis and set up forward operating bases throughout the Bramblewood. As the newly formed human Sentinels entered into service, they pushed the elves back across the bridge and back into Malvik. Not wanting to reinstate a protracted siege, the humans reached out to the dwarves of Sudar, promising them the land of Othelis east of the Tempest Mountains in exchange for their aid in pushing the elves out of Aethel. With the steam-powered machinery provided by the dwarves, the humans were able to force Vaewell to abandon their people in Malvik. King Bisdain held a parade in the newly constructed capital of the budding empire, named Meridian. The parade proved to be a fatal mistake, as a Jaguar Kith assassin leaped from the crowd, driving a dagger into the king's neck as he knocked the king from his horse. The assassin was able to disappear into the crowd during the panic and was never caught. With the king dead and no successor, the king's cousin, Roderick Bisdain, saw an opportunity for a brighter future. Being a student of history, Roderick knew that the kingdom, war-weary and nearly impoverished, wouldn't survive a questionable claim to the throne or the ensuing power struggle that would accompany it. Instead of trying to claim the throne for himself, he suggested that humans, elves, and dwarves come together, forming an alliance led by a council of elders. That would work together to rule all three of the realms in conjunction to avoid any more bloodshed. The dwarves, ever shrewd, saw an opportunity to build wealth and accepted. The elves, badly weakened by their war with the humans and beginning to see madness slip into the minds of their oldest sentinels, agreed on the condition that creating any more sentinels be outlawed. The royalty was now retitled as barons and continued to rule together by diplomacy and majority vote. Aethel is now a bustling melting pot where even the occasional orc can be seen. While no more sentinels have been created, the surviving ones are generally treated with distrust and often fear, as nearly all of them have gone mad to one degree or another, and have scattered and retreated from society, making them a rare sight across the world. Where our story began was with a group of 5 adventurers gathering in the dwarven city of Sharik. They were strangers to each other, and they met on an airship bound for Meridian. Our cast at that time was a dragonborn barbarian by the name of Nadar, who had more roguish characteristics than barbarian. We had a dwarven fighter by the name of Dane, a Lionkith rogue by the name of Lelfion, and the 2 remaining players you should be very well familiar with by now is our dwarven artificer Torque and our elven sentinel rogue Alaris. These 5 met on the airship bound for Meridian, as I said, and quickly there was already a little bit of distrust amongst the party, we'll say. Nadar had decided to sneak into Dane's room after Dane had left to head to the galley for drinks, and was caught by Lelfion. Lelfion confronted him in front of Dane, and while Dane was suspicious, he let it go, as he didn't find anything missing from his room. But during and after drinks, the party all retired to their separate rooms aboard the Whippoorwill. During the night, however, the Whippoorwill was attacked. It seemed that some bandits had stowed away in the cargo compartment and had a mind to take the ship. At this point, another guest aboard the ship, Captain Green, stepped out of his room during the commotion and charged the party to help him protect the VIP that he was escorting. The VIP was Addison Bouchard, the Baron's only daughter. The crew the party rather decided to split up. Both rogues, Alaris and Lelfion, went to scout the top deck and see if their escape route going up was clear, and it was not. The top deck was heavily contested as the bandits were trying to gain control of the ship and the passengers within. On their way to the top deck, they trapped a number of the bandits in the crew quarters before commencing their reconnaissance. Now, Dane, Nadar and Dane cleared the stowage area at the very bottom of the ship, while Torque got with Captain Green, Addison Bouchard, and her caretaker to escort them to the bottom of the ship, where parachutes awaited, and they were able to jump to safety. They landed in a field, and I will show you that now on the map. They landed between a little town called Aspenshire and the Consortium, right about here at my ping, just south of Aspenshire. They had to make their way through the grasslands after their parachute fall. And Lelfion took on almost a motherly role as she began to care for Addison, who was a little banged up from her parachute landing. Now, as the party made their way through these grasslands, they began to see signs of Ankheg hills. But they were able to successfully navigate their way through the danger without being ambushed by the giant vicious bugs. And when they entered into the woods, however, they did hear wolves howling and prowling the land. But again, they were able to elude any attack. And during the last day of travel, the party was tracked, however, before making it into Aspenshire by two wolves. But these weren't just ordinary wolves. These were wolves with modifications. They had metal prosthetic limbs and wiring and what seemed to be rudimentary electronics, surgically implanted, and in some cases replacing entire limbs. But they were able to defeat these wolves and make it into Aspenshire. Once in Aspenshire, they were confronted by the town sheriff, who wanted to know their business in the town, as the town had recently been beset by not just bandits, but also these cybernetically enhanced animals. And the party learned that the bandits were attacking from the west, while the animals had all but shut down the trade route to the east. Now, the party was not overly friendly with the sheriff, and so the sheriff was quite short with them and gave them the ultimatum to either help the town or get out of the town. At which point, the party decided that they would help. They would go clear the road to the east and open up the trade routes once again. Before heading off, they stopped at the tavern to have a couple of drinks, where they met Bailey and Otterkith. Torque offered to fix his broken boiler for a group rate on rooms, and he managed to do so. And after they spent the night, they set out to track the animal that had been uh, responsible for attacking traders along the route. In doing so, they came across the next member of our party, Crow. Crow is a human fighter who was attacked by this animal that turned out to be a cybernetically augmented bear. And he managed to survive the attack by being rendered unconscious. And once the bear thought that his prey was dead, the bear moved on to live targets, as that's what it preferred due to its programming to attack. After resuscitating Crow, the party then followed the bear's tracks to its den, where Alaris scouted the den out, but was not able to see everything inside. The party took a long time trying to figure out a plan, and the bear eventually sniffed them out and attacked, though they did make short work of it, at which point Lothion decided to collect the bear's teeth to make necklaces for everyone in the party. Nadar removed the bear's head to present to the sheriff as proof of the deed being done. The party returned to town during a heavy storm that suppressed chances of any kind of random encounters, and Nadar threw the bear's head at the sheriff's feet and received his share of the bounty. Lothion then finished fashioning the bear-tooth necklaces and presented them to her party members. Afterwards, Nadar and Dane went to the general store in town to make a few purchases, where Nadar sold the bear-tooth necklace, cementing that he had no care for this party, and this party should not care for him. And after everyone got done with their shopping, they went back to Bailey's Tavern and discussed Bailey's missing parents, whom he had inherited the inn from. While the party had not found any conclusive evidence that the bear was responsible for Bailey's parents' deaths, Nadar did decide to torment the little Otterkith by saying that he found his dad in a tree. Torque, however, turns out had a soft spot for Bailey, and did tell him that Nadar was lying. Afterwards, Bailey saw to their needs as guests and kept the drinks flowing. And the entire party decided to go to bed, except Nadar. Nadar, despite being a barbarian, again, had some very roguish tendencies, and decided that he was going to, in the middle of the night, start breaking into houses. The first house he broke into was the old blacksmith's house, but as the blacksmith in town had died a number of years ago, there was no loot to be found there. On his way to the next house, however, he failed to sneak past a deputy and broke into a different deputy's house, at which point he was confronted. Seeing that his options were be arrested or run, Nadar ran, and he ran to the west. At which point, once he got clear of the town and into the woods, he was attacked from behind and knocked out after tripping on a root in the dark. When he woke up, he found himself in a dungeon not a jail cell. The next morning, the party was interviewed by the sheriff, while Nadar was tortured by the bandits. Nadar broke relatively quickly under the torturer's techniques, and the party didn't seem to be in any rush to save him when they found out that he had been taken by the bandits. But they did ultimately decide that they would cash in on the bounty that the sheriff had just placed on Nadar's head for breaking and entering. And that bounty was 500 gold pieces to capture him alive, and an additional 200 gold pieces to transport him to the judge magistrate in Bisdain. Meanwhile, Nadar began negotiating with his captors, a elven man by the name of Booker. Booker had a couple of those cybernetic wolves, and Nadar said that he could control animals. So Booker allowed Nadar to, quote-unquote, take control of a cyber wolf. And if he could, and Nadar did actually succeed, then he would have the wolf accompany Nadar, as Nadar is to return to his party and convince them to come work for Booker. Booker gave him an additional wolf on top of that. And Booker also offered several platinum, though he never specified an amount. Then he let Nadar loose with the wolves, but no equipment, no money, not even clothes. The party and Nadar wound up meeting in the woods between the town and the Bramblewood Fort. The party explained the plan to Nadar that they were going to cash in the bounty on his head, but not actually turn him over to the judge magistrate. But Nadar insisted that he was innocent and didn't break any rules, and he refused. The party also refused his offer to go join the bandits. After a very lengthy argument in the woods, Nadar led the party to the tunnel he had left the fort from. They discovered the tunnel had been blown to cause a collapse. Alaris remembered building that tunnel, and that the fort was about 200 yards to the south. But as they were deciding whether or not to move on the fort, Torque saw the Whippoorwill, the airship that they flew in on originally, departing from the fort, moving towards Aspenshire. He and Leofion began to smell fire shortly thereafter. Leofion recognized the smell of burning buildings. Driven by regrets from the past, Torque decided he must save Bailey. Nadar refused to go, wanting to collect payment from the bandit leader instead. Finally, he was convinced, and the whole party returned to find Aspenshire in ruins and burning. I'll show you that map there. This is what they came back to. Just a complete slaughter. In a bloodlust, Torque initiated the attack on the remaining bandits as they were killing off the remaining civilians. After a long, bloody battle, the party prevailed when the bandits lost half their number, causing a morale decline, and retreated. Exhausted and bloodied, but undeterred, Torque rushed into the burning tavern to find Bailey, using Milo, his little construct, to locate the Otterkith. It was discovered that Bailey had hid from the bandits, only to be trapped under a heavy dresser when the bombs from the Whippoorwill blew it over. Torque freed Bailey and began to carry him to safety when the stairs collapsed beneath them. Crow, Alaris, and Leofion used buckets of water from the town well to douse the fire around Torque and Bailey. Crow took Bailey from Torque and carried him out, while Leofion used all her might to pull Torque free of the rubble. The party gathered at the well as Leofeon checked the dead caretaker, sheriff, and the dying Captain Green. With his final breaths, Captain Green charged Leofeon with the rescue and care of Addison, who had been taken west by the bandits. The party confronted Nadar at this point, asking if he had prior knowledge of the attack. Nadar said he saw the writing on the wall, that a war was coming, and he wants to be on the winning side. Dane decided he was done with the war and left to go far away from the front lines. At which point, the player that was playing both Nadar, we had two players that had dropped out of the game, Nadar and Dane. And Dane, I decided his character would retire in peace. Nadar, however, had been such a thorn in the side of the party that I felt the party might want some retribution, and I gave them that chance. Crow didn't hesitate. He slit Nadar's throat and left his body there to rot. Meanwhile, the party did give burials to the civilians of Aspenshire. Shortly after, they took a rest in the sheriff's office and followed footprints in the mud to the west and came across Addison's necklace that Leofeon had made her in a tree and a one-person camp. At that one-person camp, the party met Vlad, our Dragonborn Ranger. He had been hired separately by Baron Bouchard, as his daughter's airship never made its call in Meridian. And the Baron, being a concerned father, didn't want to leave the fate of his daughter to strangers, and certainly didn't want to not know what had happened to her. So he contracted Vlad to track and rescue his daughter. There was a tense discussion when the party met this Dragonborn outside of his camp, but eventually Alaris used a little bit of humor to make it clear that the party was friendly. Since the party knew Vlad's target, and the bandits outnumbered Vlad anyway, Vlad did team up with the party for this mission at least. The plan was a stealthy infiltration, and it was going well until Leofeon scrabbled loudly over a wall, waking some of the bandits. Leofeon tried to subdue the bandit quietly, but Alaris had a different idea and used his gun, waking the entire camp. A battle began, and Vlad used the chaos to try to find Addison, only to be nearly cut down by an elite elven soldier. Vlad seemingly tried to regroup with the party, but only used them to get the heat off himself while he continued the search for Addison, finding her in the building the soldier had emerged from. The elven special operations soldier downed all but Vlad, who did manage to finish the last three opponents before picking up the party. The party looted the dead enemies, finding plenty of good stuff. The party then freed Addison before taking a long rest and moving on to Bisdane. Once in Bisdane, the party did not want to rest or shop or really waste any time at all. Vlad tried to hire the first drunken sailor he saw, who was no captain at all. Alaris hired the first hooker he saw. Leofeon took Addison to get chicken kebabs. Alaris wound up going to the store, while Vlad hunted down an actual ship's captain. The party had noticed and discussed a tattoo on all of the elven bandits that said Ve Victus, though nobody could really decipher what it meant at that time. Alaris found a tag in one of the cybernetically enhanced wolves that they had defeated at the camp as well, with the name Dr. Vasilievich engraved on it, and a thank you letter on the 11 Elven Special Forces soldier. That letter read, Sergeant Brookstone, thank you for training my militiamen, so we may gain the Queen's favor. I look forward to joining you in the field soon. I have a band of meddlers on their way that I must dispatch first. With the Aspenshire operation in its final stage, I will be able to further focus on the operation and disruption in Bisdane. Again, thank you for your time and expertise. I'm sure you will return home to your lovely wife and newborn daughter soon. Long reign the Queen. Ve Victus, Captain T. Booker. Eventually, Vlad did find a captain that was willing to break the harbor master's protocol and set sail for Meridian immediately, even though ships were generally not allowed to leave Bisdane port so late in the evening. Captain Theodore of the Foamcaster let Vlad know that the drunk he tried to hire wasn't the captain at all. Vlad struck a deal with him to take the party to Meridian. Torque spent a good amount at Duskwillows, a adventuring store and general goods store all throughout Aoethera, and was gifted the latest issue of Nymphs and Nymphos, which he stashed quickly before anyone could see. And at this point, I think Torque's player has forgotten about that magazine, so we may need to remind him in a session or two. The party set sail for Meridian with the Queen's Revenge, an elven ship, in pursuit. A naval battle ensued, and Captain Theodore was the first casualty, giving Alaris command of the ship. The lengthy battle concluded when the Queen's Revenge's helm was destroyed, and the party arrived in Meridian, fully rested, and renamed the ship to the Mad Moxie, and paid to retain the 4 crew members that were on it. Just then, a ruckus occurred, and people ran northward, screaming about monsters. Torque, still a little shaken from being thrust back into battle after so long of a reprieve, heard green monsters and charged right into battle, passing a pink dragonborn named Freya, who would be the party's newest member. After slaughtering a couple dozen gremlins and narrowly saving a young mother and her baby, the party hears the town guard and decides to let them handle the infestation of the alchemy school where the gremlins were coming from, which led to the destruction of the School of Alchemy. But Addison was finally delivered home safely. And here is our map of Meridian. And this smoking heap was the School of Alchemy. With Addison home safely, Baron Bouchard paid the party 2 platinum each and asked their name. Vlad named them the Band of Yoshido, Vlad's last name. Sir Arthur Stonefist vouched for Crow as he was his commander when Crow was conscripted into military service to fight orcs. And by extension, Sir Arthur Stonefist vouched for the party and suggests hiring them to help with the orc raids that were continuing once again in the north. The Baron agreed, and the party convinced him to essentially write a blank check in order to supply them so they may defend the realm. And Baroness Ravina, the elven baroness, invited them to dinner before they went on a spending spree, spending 82,000 gold pieces from the Baron's coffers. That night, at the dinner with Ravina, the party got bored of her monologue and told her to get to the point. As she was monologuing, she was giving them essentially a cursory history lesson of how she came to power. And that lesson was more or less to recognize opportunity when you see it. She revealed that the party had spent more than Baron Bouchard assumed they would and wanted them dead until she intervened. She told them that they were to enter into service for the Council of Barons and to do her a personal favor and retrieve an item from the Starfall Scars. The next morning, the party negotiated their contract with Sir Arthur, rightfully pointing out that if the Alliance was seizing their ship, the 10,000 gold in upgrades they spent for the ship shouldn't be held against them. The party went to the library to research the Starfall Scars and the stone that Ravina wanted. They discovered the meteors deep under the ground are the source of adamantine, rare gems, and other metals. They also discovered a sketch and a warning not to allow the Starfall Gryph to grapple them. As for the stone Ravina wants, that section of the book was blacked out. They found its catalog name is PTN 311, and by backlighting the page saw the words immense power and unstable. The contract was finally negotiated for the party owing 65,000 gold or 5 years of service to the Council of Barons. The party took 1 month of downtime, at the end of which all the custom-ordered equipment that they got from the shops was delivered. After their downtime, the party departed for Hearthome. Upon arriving in Hearthome, they witnessed what was called a Hope Knife ceremony. When a child comes to 13 years old in Hearthome, because they're along the cold coast where orcs raid frequently, the child is presented a silver knife. That silver knife is meant for them to be able to kill themselves as opposed to allow themselves to be captured by the depraved orcs, who will no doubt have worse designs in mind than death for any child that they can get their hands on. The party talked tactics and strategy with the mayor and Sir Arthur. They built hedgehogs and deployed them in the surf along the coast, then dug a trench filled with sawdust and oil around the town hall. The plan was if the orcs attack Hearthome, the town is to head into the town hall, the largest building, right here, while the party fends them off and lights the trench to keep the town hall safe. But ultimately, the party decided that they wanted to take the fight to the orcs. They wound up tracking and ambushing a scouting party, while Sir Arthur's men continued to search for the base camp. And they did eventually find that base camp. After the party dispatched the orc scouting party, they returned to Sir Arthur's camp, and Sir Arthur told them that 2 of his scouts had not returned. The party easily tracked the scouts and discovered the orc camp built into a dried-up ravine. Vlad and Alaris moved in to quietly investigate a tent while the rest of the party scouted along the perimeter. Crow noticed a human roasting on a spit, while Vlad and Alaris dispatched an orc that woke up. Stealth was maintained this time. Vlad and Alaris coup de grace 3 other orcs, one of which was a raid leader. Freya turned Leofion invisible, and Leofion snuck around an orc leader to investigate another large tent. The rotted tent flap fell apart, however, waking the sleeping orcs within. Leofion tried to push the door frame to impale the orc that got up to investigate, but her timing was off and it hit the orc on the head instead. Then she cut the orc's forehead. But when it didn't have the intended effect, she stabbed him in the neck and lost her visibility. All hell broke loose at that point. A fire was started, a concussion grenade was thrown by Freya, deafening all but Vlad and Alaris. But after a hard-fought battle, the party did prevail, and even managed to take an orc leader as a prisoner, and executed the last living raider, and moved to safety before Lars set fire to the rest of the camp. While looting, the party discovered half of a geode with a clear crystal formation that looked like Ivor's phallus, the volcanic mountain on Yokai, that had a small bloom of red where a magma chamber would be. The party returned to Sir Arthur's camp and took a long rest while Sir Arthur interrogated the orc who confirmed reinforcements would not be coming until spring, and that he was the last of their forces. The party asked for 2 soldiers to come with them to the Starfall Scars and got Biggs and Wedge. They traveled to the Scars without incident and entered the last non-caved-in tunnel. Aristotle, Vlad's direwolf, was hesitant and even snapped at Vlad, but when Vlad entered the Scars anyway, he did reluctantly follow. The party entered the Scars and investigated a campsite just within, finding a journal with maps drawn in it of the other 2 large scar tunnels, which they had thought had been collapsed. They investigated the bodies of the science team, supposed science team, according to Baroness Ravina, finding they died from something bursting out of them. The party pushed further and ran into 5 Starfall Gryphs. Biggs got grappled and then implanted with 2 eggs. The battle ended eventually, and the eggs were extracted before they could hatch. Crow destroyed 1, but Leofion wanted to incubate and try to tame the other Starfall Gryph. With no other source of heat, Leofion asked Alaris to incubate the egg for her in his compartment. They found a pool underground, and Claptrap collected a bottle of the water. Pressing deeper, they found a hole in the floor that drops 20 feet. They tied off 2 ropes, and Torque and Alaris went down the hole. They discovered skeletons, and while Torque yelled up to the rest of the party, Alaris saw movement at the far side of the tunnel. After some good stealth checks, they discovered an aboleth in a cubby. Torque made a sandwich bomb, and they rolled it out for the aboleth to eat. The rest of the party came down the ropes, and battle ensued after the bomb went off. The aboleth was so slow that it never even got to attack. After the battle, the party extracted a fist-sized PTN 311, 3 Starfall ore each, 8 adamantine ore, and 12 blood crystals. They discovered the scar has not been touched and could have millions of gold worth of resources. The baby Gryph that hatched during the aboleth fight escaped at this point, while Lars tried to tame it. Vlad tracked the baby Gryph to the other side of the pool. Leofion caught it after wading through the pool and getting 10 temporary hit points for being in the water. The party discussed what to do with the baby Gryph, which had already grown to about 30 pounds. Leofion disclosed that she's searching for her father, and she may be able to use the grift as leverage with Dr. Vasilovich for information on her dad, Elwyn. Alaris and Leofion held the grift down while Vlad removed its ovipositor and bandaged it. The party discovered the tunnel caved in from the sandwich bomb and had to dig out, exhausting almost everyone. Afterwards, the party decided to camouflage the entrance to look caved in, then went back in to escape the snow and rest for the night. When they emerged from the Starfall Scars, the party went back to Hearthome to report in to Sir Arthur and get an escort back to Meridian, but the soldiers were bound for Fosshold. Yeah, guess I didn't load a Fosshold map for you. The party accompanied the soldiers to Fosshold, where Crow reconnected with townsfolk of his past. After shopping, drinking, and cleaning a saddle purchased for Vlad's direwolf, the party retired for the night. The next morning, the party met with Lord Brandon Alwyn, who gave them everything they need for the trip to Meridian, and they arrived without incident. After returning to Meridian, the party took another month off, and winter set in. But they did spend their time productively. Torque met with his cousin Pipe Wrench at the Eld Bridge to have him hire the Xander Yelenoff Mining Company to farm resources from the Starfall Scars, and the party paid 5,000 gold pieces for the survey. Alaris studied Malvik, Eld Bridge, and the Bramblewoods, giving him an advantage on knowledge checks in that area. Freya chilled, but Vlad visited an armorsmith and learned that Brage had a forge in Yokai, and taught Aristotle a few commands. Brage was the dragonborn that Vlad held responsible for the death of his father. Brage was a armorsmith who was married to Vlad's mother. And Vlad's mother left him for Vlad's father after Vlad's father had commissioned a breastplate from Brage. Brage, Vlad believed, built a weak spot into the breastplate right in front of the heart, and a fatal shot to that weak spot ended Vlad's father's life. The party then met the new captain of their ship, which had been commandeered by the Baron, though still at their disposal for anything that they should need. The captain, James McGraw, set sail for Malvik. During the voyage, Alaris built a rapport with the captain, while Torque hung out with the crew. Torque, however, got too drunk, woke up pantsless with a string around his finger. But the party arrived in Malvik and met with the Duke, whom Ravina had told them to meet with to hand over the PTN 311. Originally, the party was a little suspicious of the Duke. But after some back and forth conversation, they did give him the PTN 311 and got paid 5 platinum pieces each and were escorted to the inn. En route to the inn, a girl in a cloak used thieves' cant to signal to them. They followed her after the guards had left, and she filled them in on the beastling plight. The beastlings had all been corralled into the foreign quarter, and 1 or 2 at a time, nearly every day, the elves would come in to the foreign quarter, grab a beastling, and take them away, never to be seen again. She led them out of the city, but they nearly got caught at the south gate. But the party did eventually make their way to the safe house across the waters. Once at the safe house, they were reunited with Bailey, who turned out to be a leader of the Beastling uh, resistance. Bailey wasn't actually from Aspenshire. He did not inherit that inn from his parents. Uh, the innkeeper had been killed. Bailey had confided with the sheriff of Aspenshire about what was going on in Malvik and was on his way to Meridian to see the council and let them know what was going on when the trade routes and the bandit attacks had begun. So Bailey, to stay incognito, had posed as the innkeeper. While at the safe house, Bailey and the party finalized battle plans for extracting the remaining beastlings from Malvik, and they set out to infiltrate from the sewers. Alaris memorized the map and led the team without issue through the sewers, and they managed not to disturb a rat colony, though later faced down 3 gelatinous cubes. The team emerged from the sewers and witnessed an interaction between a beastling foxkith by the name of Drusilla and an elven woman by the name of Lady Shay. Lady Shay and the soldiers told the beastlings to behave or be shot, and then left to go about their business. The party made contact with Drusilla, who refused to leave without her husband Augustus, who had just been taken away. Freya was elected to lead the refugees through the sewers toward the docks, while the rest of the party rescued Augustus. Little did they know that this was a suicide mission for Freya, as the player had dropped out of the game. Now, taking advantage of the chaos, let me back up. The beastlings who were not in captivity then led an assault on the city walls near the Duke's palace. And the party took advantage of the chaos of that attack to move to the Duke's stronghold by street. Once there, they discovered the stronghold had been packed up and abandoned. The party found stairs leading deep underground to what turned out to be Dr. Vasilievich's lab. In that lab, they discovered brains and spinal cords awaiting sentinel bodies and found Dr. V himself studying a geode. After Mercy killing a vivisected wolfkith, it was revealed that Dr. Vasilievich is Lelfion's long-lost father, and he was forced to resume his Great War work of the Sentinel program, which was illegal. Torque revealed he wanted to learn how to create the cybernetic animals, and Dr. V also mentioned that operations are being moved to Bisdain. Crow and Vlad accompanied Drusilla to the cells and rescued her husband Augustus, while the rest of the party helped Dr. V pack. The party then linked back up to leave, but were confronted by Lady Shay with a Sentinel-3, Nadar, and Duskwillow. When the party elected not to bury Nadar, the elves came back through Aspenshire, found his body, and thought that it would be a morale blow to the party if they were to figure out a way to more or less reanimate him. And they did so using a Sentinel-2 body, creating a Sentinel-3. Once that was figured out, they exhumed their old wartime hero, Duskwillow, from the Great War, and also turned her into a Sentinel-3. Lady Shay asked, "Where are you going, Father?" revealing that her and Leofion are half-sisters. Leofion stepped between Dr. V and Shay threatened to have Daddy turn her into a Sentinel-3 as well, so she can keep her as a pet. Leofion was dumbfounded. The player who played Leofion had dropped out of the game at this point. So, Nadar raised his battle axe and split Leofion's head in two. A devastating battle ensued, claiming the lives of Drusilla and Augustus as well, and nearly ending Torque, Crow, and Alaris, though ultimately the party did prevail. Emerging from the stronghold, Aristotle was found crippled and dying. Torque stabilized him, and Vlad and Crow carried him to the ship. En route, the party discovered their crew had been hung along the pier to their ship. The Beastling refugees manned the ship as best they could. As they sailed through the sea gates, the young Wolfkiff Beastling that had originally made contact with them through Thieves' Cant was hung from the arches of the sea gate to send them a message. But the party did sail into open waters and out of danger, heading for Meridian. Aristotle and Alaris were rebuilt by Dr. V aboard the Mad Moxie. Torque assisted, giving him the knowledge of how to build steam beasts, prosthetics, and improve sentinels himself. Sir Arthur met the party at the docks and tells them that Baron Bouchard needs to speak with them. The party was then introduced to Edwin, another beloved party member. And since I failed to give him a screen of his own, we'll just drop him right here and give you a nice good close-up of our cleric, Edwin. Edwin, as it turns out, had been keeping their orc prisoner alive during his interrogation. The humans and dwarves, they discovered that the elves were indeed going to attack and had plans on retaking Aethel, restarting the Great War from 100 years ago. Humans and dwarves were now marshaling troops, but were afraid it was not enough. So the Baron asked the party to hire a dragonborn army. Dr. Vasilyevich was revealed to the Baron, who ordered his arrest, but Torque tried to intervene. Edwin convinced the Baron that Dr. Vasilyevich could be useful. The Baron also told the party that the storm over the Tempest Mountain needs to be investigated if the dwarves were to move through the Tempest Mountains and shore up defenses in Othelis. The party then has a funeral for Leofion and Freya before taking an airship to Yokai. Once in Yokai, capital Kyoko, the party got dinner and went for drinks. The bartender's green scales, however, gave Torque a PTSD episode, and he nearly beat her to death until Crow finally was able to subdue him. City soldiers took the party to the Elders. The Elders... Let me move on to Yokai. All right. Let's see. The Elders then tell the party that they can have a Dragonborn army if they can broker a peace between the Red and Green Dragonborn clans who are fighting over the Gold Dragonborn lands. As it turns out, the Gold Dragonborn weren't completely wiped out, and Nadar was the last. Vlad also sought permission to duel the blacksmith Brage that he believed to be responsible for his father's death. The party split, half going to Red Dragonborn lands to meet with Masamune, and the rest to the Green Dragonborn lands to meet with Yamato, and convinced them to meet at Evor's Phallus and negotiate. A deal was brokered, and the Gold Dragonborn city of Kinoi was to be a neutral city part of the sacred lands that surround Evor's Phallus. The the city was to be rebuilt using labor from the Green Dragonborn and paid for by all the clans, while the Red Dragonborn were to get half of the rich mines and fertile lands of the Gold Dragonborn claim. The party returned to Kyoko and informed the elders that a peace deal was brokered. At which point the elders pointed Vlad to Brage's shop, and the party did not hesitate to go, where Vlad challenged Brage to one-on-one. After the duel, well, let me back up. Vlad dueled Brage and killed him before asking the Black Dragonborn elder about the Bakeneko that Brage said he had given Vlad's mother to. He learned that the Bakeneko come from the Shireto. The party was then introduced to You Know 'Em, You Love 'Em, Siren. And they were asked to help Siren wipe out the bullywogs that were a crucial part of the attack on the Gold Dragonborn. The party then set forth for the Shireto, landing on the Bullywog Island, the northernmost island, where they encountered some juvenile wogs. Edwin studied them briefly, but once Torque saw green, the fight was on. After killing multiple bullywogs, the party continued to a burrow where they saw bullywogs hiding as the airship approached. And from there, well, that's where we started to record and post our sessions. So, I definitely invite you to go back to episode 1 if you have not seen it yet and give it a watch. Now, as for the last part of our most recent episode, to catch you up, the party, after departing Yokai, the party went to Sharik to investigate the storms in the Tempest Mountain. When they arrived in the dwarven city of Sharik, they found an air of panic as the rains had been unrelenting. The people of Sharik were emplacing sandbags around their stores. They were boarding up windows. They were preparing for flood. Those that could afford to grab what they could and leave were heading for the docks, trying to get out while they still could. But they did find one store open where they were able to purchase a few supplies before heading towards the mountains. Once they reached the base of the mountains, though, they decided to stop into Torque's hometown of Toolbox, a underground city in the Tempest Mountains. And Torque was given a warm welcome by friends and family, even his high school crush. But he refused to see his parents until a device that he's been working on in secret is completed. After purchasing some dwarven warhammers, though, the party did set off for the mountain pass, where they were ambushed by goblins and orcs. And that is where our next session is going to pick up, is with the party in that fight against the goblins and orcs in the Tempest Mountains. So, if you haven't yet, definitely give us a like. give us a subscribe, and tell your friends. Let's try to grow this channel. Let's try to bring more adventurers in to join us as we venture through Aoethera. Let's see how this all plays out. Are the humans and dwarves going to be able to marshal enough troops to fight off the elven incursion? Are the elves going to ultimately win? I don't know. We'll have to see. But join us. Join us as we go through it.